The leader of the group, an older man with piercing eyes, approached her and placed a hand on her shoulder. "Saad, you are about to embark on a journey that few dare to take. This snake holds the key to your wealth and fortune. Honor it, respect it, and you shall have everything you desire." Trembling, Saad approached the platform, lying down beside the snake as instructed. As she closed her eyes, she felt the cool, smooth scales of the snake as it moved alongside her, its presence both frightening and oddly comforting. That night, Saada's dreams were filled with visions of riches, of gold and jewels pouring into her hands, of boutiques with her name on the signs. She woke up feeling different, a sense of power and possibility coursing through her. Not long after her visit to the spiritualist, Saad received devastating news. Her childhood friend, Amaka, had fallen ill. The illness had come out of nowhere, and despite visiting doctors and healers, Amaka's condition only worsened. Saad felt a pang of guilt, as if somehow her fortune had brought this darkness upon her friend. She went to visit Amaka, who lay in bed, pale and weak, her once bright eyes dull with pain. The sight broke Saada's heart, and she grasped her friend's hand, tears in her eyes. "I'm so sorry, Amaka," Saad whispered, guilt gnawing at her soul. "I don't know what's happening, but I promise I'll make it right." Amaka looked at her, a faint smile on her lips. "Saad, you always wanted more than this village could offer. You've become so successful, and I'm proud of you." But her eyes held a sadness that Saad couldn't ignore. As she left, Saad realized that her fortune was like a shadow, casting darkness over those she cared about. The curse was claiming those closest to her, and she didn't know how to stop it. Haunted by the thought that her wealth had brought suffering upon Amaka, Saad returned to Lola. She demanded to know the full truth of the curse. "Lola," Saad said, her voice trembling with anger, "why didn't you tell me that my fortune would bring harm to the people I love?" Lola sighed, her eyes heavy with something like regret. "Saad, I gave you what you wanted. I gave you wealth, power, and freedom. But nothing in this world comes without a price. The spirits demand balance. For every blessing they grant, a shadow is cast." Saad clenched her fists, struggling to contain her anger. "This isn't balance, Lola. People are suffering because of me. Amaka is dying. I didn't agree to this." Lola looked at her with pity. "Saad, the spirits are beyond our understanding. Their ways are ancient and unyielding. If you wish to break free, you must find the source of the curse and confront it. But be warned, the path back is filled with more dangers than you can imagine." As Saad left Lola's house, a sense of determination filled her. She couldn't let the curse destroy those she loved. She had sacrificed enough and could no longer ignore the suffering that trailed in her wake. She would find the source of the curse, even if it meant confronting the snake that had given her wealth. That night, she returned to the house where she had first lain beside the sacred snake. The room was dark and silent, the air thick with an ancient energy. The snake lay coiled on the platform, its eyes watching her with an intelligence that sent chills down her spine. "Tell me what I must do," she whispered, her voice breaking. "How do I end this curse?" In her heart, she knew the answer wouldn't come easily. She would have to make sacrifices, confront her deepest fears, and perhaps even face the spirits who had granted her the riches she had once longed for. But she was ready, and for the first time since her journey began, Saad felt a glimmer of hope that perhaps there was a way out of this darkness. Saad stood alone in the dim room, the silence pressing down on her. She could feel the cold eyes of the sacred snake watching her, its gaze both a warning and an invitation. Saad shivered, feeling the weight of the spirits surrounding her. She didn't know what to expect, but she was ready to do anything to lift the curse and free herself and her loved ones from the shadow of misfortune. The snake began to move, its sleek, scaled body gliding across the floor toward her. Saad didn't flinch. Instead, she knelt before the creature, showing the humility and respect she had learned in her time within the occult group. The snake lifted its head, seeming to stare deep into her soul. It opened its mouth, and a soft, hissing voice filled the room, as if carried by a hidden wind. "Saad," the voice whispered, though no one else was there, you have taken what is not yours to hold. Now the spirits demand a sacrifice, a balance to the blessings you have received." Saad swallowed, trying to steady her voice. "I'll do anything to end this. Please, tell me what I must do." The snake continued to look at her, its dark eyes gleaming with an ancient knowledge. "The wealth you have gained came from the souls of the lost, the ones who now linger around you, trapped between this world and the next. To release them, you must give up what you have gained. Only then can the curse be lifted." Sada's heart sank. Giving up her wealth, her boutiques, her beautiful home, everything she had built from the ground up. But when she thought of Amaka's suffering and the haunting shadows that clung to her, she realized that this was her only option. I will do it," she whispered, tears filling her eyes. "I'll give it all up if it means finding peace again." The snake tilted its head, as if testing her sincerity. "Then prepare yourself. Your journey has only just begun." Saad returned to her lavish home, her heart heavy with the decision she had made. She could feel the darkness in the corners, like a living thing that crept closer with every heartbeat. She knew the curse would only worsen if she didn't act soon. And so she set about the painful task of dismantling her empire, one boutique at a time. With a heavy heart, she sold her boutiques, giving the profits to her employees and those in need. She gave away her luxurious dresses, her expensive jewelry, and even her grand home. Piece by piece, Saad watched her wealth slip through her fingers, but she held on to her resolve. Every time she felt a pang of regret, she reminded herself of Amaka's suffering and the faces of those who had been lost. As she went about her task, the visions began to lessen, and the shadows that once haunted her seemed to withdraw. She could feel the weight of the curse lifting, but she knew her journey wasn't over yet. When all was done, Saad had only a small sum left, a fraction of what she once possessed. She took the money and returned to her village, hoping to find solace in the familiar faces and comforting embrace of her mother. But as she stepped into the village, she noticed the wary looks from the villagers. They whispered among themselves, casting suspicious glances in her direction. Saad knew that stories of her success and subsequent downfall had traveled back to the village. To them, she was a mystery, a young woman who had left with nothing and returned with a cursed fortune. Despite the whispers, Saad kept her head held high, determined to find peace. Her mother welcomed her with open arms, sensing the heaviness in her daughter's heart. Together, they sat under the baobab tree, just as they had when Saad was a child. For the first time in a long time, Saad felt a glimmer of hope. She was back where she belonged, free from the weight of riches and the curse that had plagued her. One night, as Saad lay asleep in her childhood home, she was visited by a strange vision. In her dream, she found herself back in the city, walking through her empty boutiques, the walls echoing with the whispers of the lost. She turned a corner and saw the snake, coiled on a throne made of gold, its eyes fixed on her. "You have returned what was given," the snake hissed, its voice carrying a strange mixture of approval and warning. "But the curse cannot be lifted so easily. The spirits demand a final act, a sacrifice that will prove your devotion beyond wealth." Sada's heart raced. "What sacrifice? I have already given everything." The snake's eyes glowed. "The life you love most must be offered. Only then will the balance be restored." Saad woke up in a cold sweat, her heart pounding. She knew what the spirits meant, and the realization filled her with dread. Her mother was the one she loved most, the one who had supported her through everything. To lose her mother would be unbearable, and yet it was the only way to fully break the curse. Torn between fear and love, Saad sought the guidance of the village elder, an old woman named Neka, who was known for her wisdom and knowledge of the spiritual world. Neka listened quietly as Saad told her story, her wrinkled face calm but serious. "The spirits are powerful, and they do not give lightly," Neka said, her voice soft yet firm. "To break a curse such as this is no simple task. But there may be another way, one that does not involve the life of your mother." Sada's heart leapt with hope. "Tell me, please." Neka nodded. "There is a ritual that can appease the spirits, one that requires you to journey into the forest and seek out the sacred tree. This tree is said to be the gateway between worlds. Offer a piece of your heart to the spirits there, and they may accept it in place of your mother's life. Saad felt a mixture of relief and trepidation. A piece of my heart? What does that mean? The journey will reveal the answer, Neka replied cryptically. But be warned, many who seek the sacred tree are never seen again. Despite the risk, Saad knew she had to try. She couldn't bear the thought of sacrificing her mother. With a heavy heart, she prepared for the journey, hoping that the sacred tree would offer her a chance to end the curse without losing the one she loved most. Early the next morning, Saad set out on her journey. The forest loomed before her, its trees tall and ancient, their branches intertwined like a woven tapestry. She stepped onto the narrow path that led deeper into the woods, feeling a mixture of fear and determination. The forest was thick with mist, and the sounds of birds and rustling leaves surrounded her, giving the place an otherworldly quality. As she walked, she thought about her mother, about the life she had dreamed of and the price she had paid for it. She realized that the wealth she had once craved had blinded her to the simple joys of her village life. Now all she wanted was peace. Hours passed, and the forest grew darker. Strange sounds echoed around her, whispers that seemed to call her name, shadows that moved just beyond her sight. She reminded herself of Neka's words, that the sacred tree was a gateway to the spirit world, a place where the living and the dead were not so far apart. Finally, she reached a clearing where a massive tree stood, its branches reaching high into the sky. Its trunk was ancient and twisted, covered in symbols that seemed to pulse with a strange green light. Saad knew at once that this was the sacred tree. Standing before the sacred tree, Saad felt a wave of emotions wash over her. She placed her hands on the trunk, feeling its rough bark beneath her fingers, and closed her eyes, letting her heart speak to the spirits. "Spirits of the sacred tree," she whispered, "I come to offer a piece of my heart in exchange for my mother's life. I have seen the pain my desires have caused, and I am ready to do whatever it takes to make things right." As she spoke, the tree began to glow, and a soft voice filled her mind. It was the voice of the spirits, speaking as one. "To offer a piece of your heart is to give up a part of your soul," the voice said. "You will lose something precious to you, something that cannot be regained. Do you accept this sacrifice?" Saad felt a tear slip down her cheek. She thought of her mother, of the life she wanted to protect, and of the price she was willing to pay. "I accept," she whispered, her voice steady. The ground beneath her trembled, and the tree's bark shifted, revealing a hollow in its trunk. A soft, green light shone from within, and Saad felt a pull, as if a part of her very soul was being drawn toward the tree. She closed her eyes, surrendering to the spirit's will. When she opened her eyes, the light had faded, and the forest was silent once more. She felt different, as if a part of her heart had been taken, leaving an emptiness she couldn't describe. But she also felt a sense of peace, as if the weight of the curse had finally lifted. With a heavy yet hopeful heart, Saad turned and began the journey back to her village, unsure of what awaited her but grateful for the chance to start anew. The journey back through the forest felt lighter for Saad, as though a shadow had finally lifted from her soul. Each step brought her closer to the familiar sights and sounds of her village, and with every breath, she felt the weight of her decisions slowly dissipate. But an emptiness still lingered, a deep ache in her chest that reminded her of the part herself she had left with the sacred tree. It was the sacrifice she had made, and she hoped it would be enough. When she finally arrived at the village, the first person she saw was her mother. Her mother's face lit up, and she hurried to embrace Saad, wrapping her arms around her daughter with a strength that took Saad by surprise. Relief flooded Saada's heart, and she clung to her mother as though she might disappear if she let go. "Oh, Saad, my child, I've been praying for your safe return," her mother whispered, brushing a tear from her eye. "You look different. You've grown so much." Saad smiled, a bittersweet expression crossing her face. She had changed more than her mother could know. She had touched the world of spirits, had given up part of her heart, and had faced the weight of her own desires and the curses they brought. But she kept these thoughts to herself, feeling the peace that came with knowing her mother was safe. Over the following days, Saad settled back into village life. She helped her mother with daily chores, tended to their small garden, and spent time under the baobab tree where she had played as a child. The villagers, however, were less welcoming. They were wary of her, sensing the change in her and the strange aura that lingered around her. Rumors swirled that she had returned with dark secrets, that her riches had come from dark powers, and that she had brought something sinister back with her. One afternoon, as she helped her mother draw water from the well, a group of women approached her, their faces shadowed with suspicion. Saad, one of them began, her voice firm, "We heard tales of the fortune you had in the city, and now you return with empty hands. What happened?" Saad hesitated, uncertain of how much to reveal. She knew the villagers wouldn't understand the spiritual trials she had endured, but she also knew that she owed them honesty. "I did find wealth in the city, but it came at a terrible price," she began, her voice steady but soft. "I was blinded by my own greed and lost my way. I have returned with what is most important, my family and my peace." The women exchanged glances, clearly unsatisfied. "Be careful, Saad," one of them warned. "There are spirits here too, and they don't take kindly to those who meddle with powers beyond their understanding." Saad nodded respectfully, choosing not to argue. She knew she had been given a second chance, and she would not waste it. That night, Saad was visited by a dream. In it, she stood before the sacred tree once again, but this time she wasn't alone. Shadows gathered around her, faces from her past, villagers and strangers, all watching her in silence. And then she saw a figure emerge from the shadows, its form familiar and comforting. It was Amaka, her childhood friend, who had fallen ill during Sada's days of fortune. Sada's heart twisted as Amaka approached her, her eyes filled with sadness. "Saad," Amaka's voice echoed, soft but sorrowful, "I suffered because of your choices, and I am not the only one. Do not forget those who paid the price for your ambition." Saad fell to her knees, reaching out to her friend. "I'm so sorry, Amaka. I never meant for any harm to come to you. I was blinded by the promise of wealth, and I let the spirits lead me astray. Please forgive me." Amaka's figure shimmered, fading back into the shadows, but her voice lingered. "Forgiveness will come with time, Saad. Honor those you have hurt, and remember that the path forward is filled with choices that will test your heart." When Saad woke, she was filled with a deep resolve. She would find a way to make amends for the lives her actions had touched, to honor the memories of those who had suffered because of her ambition. She couldn't change the past, but she could create a new future. With a newfound purpose, Saad began to devote herself to helping those in her village. She spent her days offering assistance where it was needed, whether it was helping with farming, mending roofs, or gathering herbs for the village healer. Slowly, the villagers began to see her in a different light. The suspicion in their eyes softened, and they began to see Saad not as the woman who had returned with dark secrets, but as one of their own, someone who was trying to rebuild her life. Saad also sought out the families of those who had been affected by her wealth and the curse it had brought. She offered apologies, gifts, and aid, hoping that her actions could, in some small way, repay the debt she felt. She poured her heart into her work, and though it was tiring, she found a peace in it that she had never known in the city. Each night, she would sit with her mother under the baobab tree, and they would talk about their hopes and dreams. Saad found herself laughing again, feeling the warmth of her mother's love and the simplicity of life in the village. She realized that the riches she had once pursued had been nothing more than a hollow shell. True wealth, she now understood, lay in the connection she shared with those around her. One evening, as Saad returned from helping an elderly woman with her fields, she was surprised to find a familiar figure waiting for her in the village. It was the spiritualist from the occult group, the one who had initiated her into the world of wealth and curses. He stood at the edge of the village, his expression unreadable. "Saad," he called, his voice carrying a strange weight, "you have come far from the city, but the spirits still speak of you. They are watching, curious about what you will do next. Saad approached him cautiously, feeling a mixture of respect and wariness. "I've left that life behind," she said firmly. "I don't want anything more from the spirits." The spiritualist smiled, a hint of sadness in his eyes. "The spirits are not so easily dismissed. You have offered a piece of your heart, but they are watching to see if you will honor your promise." Saad frowned. "What more can I give them? I've given up my wealth, I've made amends, and I've returned to the life I once knew." The spiritualist nodded thoughtfully. "Yes, you have done much. But the journey of redemption is never complete, Saad. You must continue to honor the balance you disrupted, to live a life that respects the sacrifices of others." As he turned to leave, he paused and looked back at her. "The spirits have granted you peace, but it is up to you to keep it. Do not stray from this path, for the shadows are always watching." With those final words, the spiritualist disappeared into the night, leaving Saad to ponder his message. In the months that followed, Saad dedicated herself to her village and her family. She became known not for her wealth, but for her kindness and her willingness to help others. She taught the younger children the lessons she had learned, cautioning them against the allure of easy riches and the dangers of losing oneself to greed. Her mother watched her transformation with pride, seeing her daughter blossom into a woman of strength and wisdom. Together, they tended to their small farm, planting crops and raising animals, finding joy in the simple tasks of daily life. Sada's story became a cautionary tale for the village, a reminder of the dangers that lay beyond the boundaries of their simple lives. And though some still whispered of the dark powers she had once wielded, they also spoke of her redemption and her dedication to the village. Saad knew she would never forget the faces of those who had suffered because of her choices, and she carried their memory in her heart. It was a burden, but it was also a reminder of the life she had once sought and the peace she had finally found.